Hey, what's up guys, Will here for GSM Arena. Following the announcement of Samsung's new Galaxy Z5 series, foldable phones are so hot right now. So it's the perfect time to go over an alternative flip phone, the Moto Razr 40. The Razr 40 doesn't bring the top chipset or an edge-to-edge cover screen, but it's a lot less expensive than the Z Flip 5 or Razr 40 Ultra. So let's see what it does have to offer in our full review. Like other flip-style phones, the Razr 40 is compact, using foldable screen tech to hide a typical size smartphone within a clamshell form factor. It's actually very similar to the premium Razr 40 Ultra we've already reviewed and recommended. The Razr 40 is the same size, shape, and weight, and you get a grippy vegan leather backing, like you can on the Ultra. The aluminum frame and stainless steel teardrop hinge are the same too. This hinge allows the Razr 40 to fold completely flat, without a gap, and it can stay open at different angles too. You also get Gorilla Glass Victus protection and IP52 rated ingress protection, just like on the Ultra. The most noticeable difference design-wise from the Razr 40 Ultra or Galaxy Z Flip 5 is the external screen. It's a small 1.5-inch OLED with a pixel density of 282 ppi and a 60Hz refresh rate. That's tiny compared to the large, cutting-edge cover screens out there, and it can't run full-fledged apps, but it's useful for seeing notifications, adjusting quick settings, and accessing widgets. Basically what was the norm in the previous generation of flip devices. And the other function is a viewfinder for when you want to take selfies using the main cameras. The Razr 40's inner display is a 6.9-inch foldable LTPO OLED with a 1080p resolution and a 144Hz refresh rate. That refresh rate is a bit lower than the 165Hz on the Razr 40 Ultra, but it doesn't make much difference. That's because for some reason both phones would max out at 120Hz, except for benchmarks or certain games. The LTPO tech allows the refresh rate to dial down all the way to 10Hz when idling to save energy. The other aspects of the screen are very similar to the Ultra's. The max brightness is flagship grade. We measured around 500 nits with a manual slider, and this can boost to over 1000 in auto mode in bright sun. Content looks sharp, and there's support for 10-bit color and HDR10+ video. The color accuracy can be great too, based on your color settings. And while there is a crease where the screen folds over, it's hard to notice unless you look for it. For audio, the Razr 40 has a pair of stereo speakers, and they have very good loudness, with nice vocals and highs, and even some bass. You can check out for yourself and compare with other devices through the provided link. The Moto Razr 40 has a side-mounted fingerprint reader for biometrics. It's quite responsive. And the phone comes with 128 or 256 gigs of storage, but that isn't expandable through microSD. Now let's talk about the interface. Like on other recent Motorola phones, you get a near-stock Android 13 with some Moto customizations on top. These Moto features can be found organized within the Moto app, and these include things like gestures and customization options. Dynamic wallpapers are neat. These are made to animate when you open and close the phone. Some apps will split their UI in two when the phone is half folded, mostly for keyboard or camera purposes. Motorola promises software support for 3 major OS updates on the Razr 40 and Razr 40 Ultra. And like on the Ultra, the Razr 40 has support for Moto's Ready 4, allowing you to connect the device to a larger screen or PC, and even get a desktop-like experience. Now let's get into the chipset. Here you get mid-range silicon, and not even the latest generation. It's a Snapdragon 7 Gen 1. That's a far cry from the class-leading Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 of the Galaxy Z Flip 5, or even the older Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 inside the Razr 40 Ultra. Even flip devices running the old Snapdragon 888 outscore the Razr 40 in benchmarks. It's sorely underpowered in comparison when it comes to the GPU. We didn't run into any performance issues when it comes to normal tasks, but this is not a phone you'd use for heavy gaming. We wish that Moto had at least included the latest Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 here. At least in our stress test, the thermal management here is much more stable than you see on many other flip-style devices. One advantage that the Razr 40 has over the Ultra is its larger 4400 mAh battery capacity, at least on paper. In our testing though, the Razr 40 earned a very similar endurance rating of 85 hours. That's still decent, but indicates that this device's power efficiency could be better. The Razr 40 supports 30-watt charging, and the charging speed here is quite decent. We were able to top up from 0 to 57% in half an hour. There's also support for wireless charging. Finally, we're onto the cameras. The Razr 40 has a 64 megapixel main cam and a 13 megapixel ultra-wide camera. Because of pixel binning, the main camera's photos come out at 16 megapixels by default. They have low noise and realistic looking colors, and despite the high contrast, the dynamic range is adequate. The detail level of these photos isn't as high as what we've seen from other phones lately, with a touch of softness. Still, the detail is enough, and we prefer this sort of rendition instead of an over-sharpened one. Like I mentioned earlier, you can easily take selfies with the main cam, and these are great. The subject is detailed and exposed well, there's no intrusive noise, and the colors are great, and so is the dynamic range. One thing worth noting is that if you're holding the phone normally, these photos will come out in a vertical orientation, despite what the viewfinder might suggest. The main cam's portrait mode offers proficient subject separation, likable blur, and excellent exposure, colors, and dynamic range. But for some reason, the detail level leaves more to be desired. In low light conditions, the Razr 40 can automatically use its night vision processing, which takes a couple of seconds for each shot. The results are basically the same as if you toggle the night mode on. These photos are quite likable, they're detailed and well exposed, with a wide dynamic range and good contrast. The noise is low and the colors are lively. Here's what it looks like if night vision is turned off. You get less detailed photos which are softer, a bit darker, and with a narrower dynamic range. The Razr 40 supports 4K video capture, and these we shot with the main cam are exceptional. The detail level is impressively high, noise is absent, and the colors are lively too. The dynamic range is quite wide, and yet the contrast remains high enough. Electronic stabilization is optional, and does a decent job to smooth out smaller movements and jitters. More sudden or extreme movements are still left behind. In low light, the 4K videos have an acceptable level of detail and color saturation. Otherwise, the exposure, noise level, and dynamic range leave more to be desired. Now let's talk about the ultra-wide cam. Its 13 megapixel photos aren't super impressive, but they're still above average. The colors are a little desaturated, and the detail looks a bit overprocessed from up close. But still, the detail level is enough, and there's gentle noise reduction, good contrast, and wide dynamic range. Plus, since the ultra-wide has autofocus, you can use it to take macro shots of close-up subjects. Now let's see some low-light shots, taken with the auto night vision processing active. These have a bright exposure, good dynamic range, decent colors, and tolerable noise. The detail level isn't amazing, but these photos are quite usable. 4K videos from the ultra-wide cam are sharp and detailed, at least in the center. The corners are soft and noisy. There's good contrast and wide dynamic range, and the colors look good. Finally, let's have a look at selfies taken with the dedicated 32 megapixel front-facing cam, which bins pixels to produce 8 megapixel photos. While this method of taking selfies may not be as exciting as with the main camera, these photos are still excellent, with plenty of detail and sharpness, low noise, and good exposure. The colors are lovely, and the dynamic range is wide too. So there you have it, the Motorola Razr 40. It's a great flip phone. The folding mechanism and design are top-notch, and the rest of the package is nice too. What you don't get here is a large cover screen or a high-powered chipset. Those are what set the top flagship models apart right now. The Galaxy Z Flip 4 would also bring you a powerful chipset, and is comparable to the Moto price-wise, but it is a year older by now, and there's no leather there. In the end, the Moto Razr 40 may not be perfect, but if you're looking for a solid alternative to Samsung's flips that won't break the bank, it is worth considering. Thanks for watching, guys. Here are some other flip phones we reviewed, starting with the Galaxy Z Flip 4. Or if you're not afraid to spend some cash, you could check out the Moto Razr 40 Ultra. Let us know what you think, and I'll see you on the next one.